Nalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Vadarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krito Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Namah Pranavarthaya Shuddha Jnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Vavato Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti 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 Om Bhadram Karne Vishruniyama Devaha Bhadram Pashye Makshabhir Yadatraha Sthirairangai Shushtvagam Sastanubi Vishema Deva Hitayadayu Swasti na Indro Vriddhashavaha Swasti na Pusha Vishvavedaha Swasti nastakshyo Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brahaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti 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 Upanishad, the word itself, indicates that the text tells us the truth of the self. You've seen that. Upa, ni, shad. Shadaldr is the root. Has three different meanings. Gamanam, Visaranam, and Unmoolanam. That text, which reveals the truth of what is closest to one, that is I, removes all, by removing all ignorance around it. And ignorance is universal. The false notion we have is universal. By removing all that false notion, by showing the aikyam, the oneness between the Jivatma, which is identified often with the Ahankara, and Paramatma, and does it with the help of a guru, so it is removed, the ignorance is removed from its very root. Unmoolanam. That is why this knowledge once gained, aparokshataya once gained, can never be uprooted. Once this jnanam is gained, it is not a jnanam that is gained in the memory. Buddhi has to be used, but it does go, it transcends the buddhi. Buddhi itself is a karyam. This knowledge of the self, the revealing of the fact that I am Purnaha. That Purnatvam, completeness, which implies that there cannot be another. What is infinite? You cannot have an infinite and a second object of any kind. By very understanding of the word Purnatvam implies that there cannot be a second. So that which explains to us with the help of a guru the very nature of the self as being Purna, by removing the avidya and all that comes along with the avidya means automatically avidya leads to, avidya means avidya of the self, not knowing the reality of the self leads to one's having to do something, some karma. I want to achieve this, I want to do the other, etc. Which in turn leads to a necessary karma phala. Therefore, a combination of sukha and dukkha. Because there is a sharira that is required. All of this, what Swami Ji used to call avidya and its brood, everything that follows avidya, the entire thing is removed with the understanding of the truth of the self. Aparokshataya, we will use the word again and again. Aparokshataya meaning it is not like knowing any object. An object can be directly known through the senses. That object may be outside the ken of the senses. Therefore, can be known indirectly through inference, through anumana. All of it still requires that the senses be operating and get the direct perception of something which I know. Our famous example, senses detect smoke in the mountain, but we infer fire. But to infer fire, that senses must perceive that smoke. So the senses have to be operational. Senses can be enhanced in many ways. Modern science and technology gives us tools to do that. But the senses are still required. You can use an electron microscope or a Hubble telescope, but you still have to see. Every object has to be perceived. Here we are talking about not an object, but yourself. How do I know I? When you see an object, there is a seer who sees an object. But the one that I want to know is I, the subject, the seer. None of the known methodologies work. Therefore, we have to bank on another methodology. That methodology is Vedanta. Why Vedanta? Why not my book on psychology? There are very cogent arguments why a book on psychology or physiology or any of the other religious texts can reveal this truth. Because none of them has the subject matter I. Psychology deals with the mind. Mind is also an object. Physiology deals with the body, another object. Physics, geography, chemistry, everything deals with objects of the world. Therefore, they cannot be the source of knowledge for I. The important point to understand. The source of knowledge for anything can only reveal that thing. Eyes can reveal color and form. And it is unique. The nose cannot reveal it. A book cannot reveal it. Only eyes can reveal color and form. The nose can reveal smell. It is a unique field of operation for each means of knowledge called pramana. So in this jagat, in this whole samsara that we know, every object can be perceived through one or the other of the various direct means of perception or an indirect means of perception. Normally, indirect means of perception can either give you knowledge of something which can be verified later or of objects which is not possible to verify, prove or disprove. A travel brochure or a TV show on Ukraine reveals knowledge of what is happening in Ukraine. The many messages that come on WhatsApp and other social media reveal something about somebody or something. But these can be verified by direct perception. We know half the stuff that comes on social media is fake. So we have to verify it by directly going and checking it out. Just like a travel brochure. I remember once we had gone to Kashi and booked rooms through Oyo hotels. I can see Anand smiling. He was there on the trip. And we went searching for the hotel. All that it said when we booked that hotel room was very flowery. So we got some knowledge of that hotel. And when we went to Kashi, rather late in the night, from the airport, we took a cab and went to this place. We had to search through gullies and found one shady looking hotel. Nothing like what was described in the brochure. Fortunately, of course, we said we don't want to stay here. One more was available to us, not too far out. But that can be verified. And there are others where you get indirect knowledge, which there is no way of verifying. Vedas tell you that if one does certain acts in one's life, after this physical body goes, one will travel to another loka. Physical body is gone. Therefore, what is identified as one is not the physical body, but something else. Travels to another loka. Now, this is indirect knowledge given to us by the Vedas. And because we accept Vedas as a source of knowledge, we accept this. But there is no way of proving or disproving this. We don't have anybody who's been there and back can tell us, yes, such a place exists, or no, such a place doesn't exist. All this is possible. But when it comes to understanding the nature of I as being Purna, none of this will work. Neither direct knowledge. Pratyaksha jnanam, nor indirect knowledge, whether verifiable or not verifiable, or paroksha jnanam. So the Oyo hotels and brochure was paroksha jnanam. We had not been there. Swargaloka is paroksha jnanam. We may have been there, but we don't know. The former can be verified, the latter cannot be verified. Where would you categorize the knowledge of the self? Is it pratyaksha jnanam or is it paroksha jnanam? It is not pratyaksha jnanam because there is no way your senses can find the truth of the subject, I. When you have an object, I, using my eyes, see black color. But how am I going to see I using the eyes? Not possible. So it cannot be pratyaksha jnanam. Eyes cannot detect it, ears cannot detect it, nose cannot smell it. You can smell yourself if you've not had a bath for several days, but that's the body, that's not I. Therefore, is it paroksha jnanam? How do you say it's paroksha jnanam? Because Shastra tells me that you are Brahman. And that Brahman is Satchidananda. Oh, got it. I know now. But how do you know? It is neither verifiable, not verifiable. It cannot be known. It is neither in the category of knowable, nor in the category of known, nor in the category of unknown. So it cannot be paroksha jnanam also. It is not. We are not looking at anything, any object. We're looking at saying what is the nature of I. So it is not paroksha jnanam, nor is it pratyaksha jnanam. It is the only jnanam which is called aparoksha jnanam, not paroksha. It is not paroksha. Paroksha is away from access to these senses. That which is outside my range of hearing is paroksha. That which is beyond my sight is paroksha. But I'm talking about I. You cannot be closer than that. You cannot be far away. So it is not paroksha. It is the jnanam that I have to understand. Therefore, the methodology that we use for knowing any object which is non-I, ātmatva, will not work when you want to understand I. So all that we know about how to gain knowledge of something because of our experience in life, they have to be put aside when you want to know this. That knowledge is available only in the Upanishads. That Upanishad for which the subject matter is you. There is nothing else where the subject matter can be. The karma kanda of the Veda, subject matter is not you. Not directly. The Quran is not the subject matter, is not you. The Bible, the subject matter is not you. Because whatever they talk about can be easily negated as being not I. There is, like I said, rigorous logical argument of what can be taken as a pramana, as a means of knowledge, as a source of knowledge. And if I apply all of them, none of the other methods will fulfill the conditions for being the source of knowledge for I. The only one that fulfills all the conditions is Upanishad. That's why the very word Upanishad, Upa is near. What is nearest is I. Ni is nishchayena, without any shesha, without any doubt. And I said, Shadilra gives you that knowledge by removing the ignorance from its very roots. Clearly, we having been so conditioned to know objects, we tend to apply the same methodology here also. And therefore, we have a lot of obstacles. Every Upanishad helps us by showing how one should understand the nature of I. But being such a subtle and extremely difficult subject, it requires the words which are used in this have to be handled by somebody who has already gone through it. That is why this knowledge is gained is always together with the Upanishad and the Guru. So there are many Upanishads. Why do we need so many Upanishads? In every Veda, there is a bulk portion which tells us the ways and means, do's and don'ts. If you do this, you will get this. If you follow these instructions, you will gain this. And every Veda at the end portion contains several Upanishads, texts which help us to understand the nature of I. And because they happen to be the end of each Veda, they are collectively called Vedanta, Vedasya Anta, Vedanam Anta. At the end of every Veda. Why have so many Vedas? Apparently, they were all this knowledge is available. But Vyasacharya codified them in some form. He didn't create them. Codified them. To allow each family to take any one, because everyone says the same thing. And follow that as my Veda. Whether I'm a follower of Yajurveda or Atharva Veda or Rig Veda or Samaveda It doesn't matter. I follow that Veda so that I have a distinct, direct methodology for living my life and for learning the truth about myself. I don't necessarily have to study all four Vedas, although people do. But generally, if one can study only one Veda, that's adequate, sufficient. Every Veda has several Upanishads. The need for so many Upanishads arises again from the same fact that this knowledge is not like the knowledge of any object. And in order to grasp that, our human mind requires multiple inputs. It requires that these inputs are analyzed, thought about, contemplated upon, so that clarity emerges. Why aparoksha jnanam becomes so important. It is not something I can say, oh, I have understood Brahman as a third person. It's not an object other than you. So the whole knowledge is presented in multiple forms, with multiple perspectives, multiple methodologies to help us understand the truth of the self. But the essence of every Upanishad is the same. Every Upanishad shows us the nature of I is the same as the nature of Paramatma. Sometimes it is confusing. Not sometimes, perhaps most times. We talk in the same breath of Paramatma and Brahman. Paramatma, we say, is Jagat Karanam. We look at that Jagat Karanam as one which has all the power to create this Jagat, to sustain this Jagat, and to resolve this Jagat back into itself. Therefore, it has properties, attributes, the power to create, the power to sustain, the power to resolve back into itself. We also talk in the same breath of Brahman as Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. It can create a confusion. Which of these two am I? What is the nature of the self? Is the nature of the self as same as Paramatma, or is the nature of the self that Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma? That Brahma which is Nirguna, has no attributes. Or is it this Parameshwara, Paramatma, which has all this power, all this knowledge? What is this Aikyam we are talking about, the oneness we are talking about? That oneness between I, which I identify with Jivatma, and Paramatma, or is it the oneness between I and Brahman? That Nirguna Brahman, which is infinite, Anantam? There can be some confusion. One excellent example we have been using earlier also, all in the Shastra, is that of water and wave. There is an ocean, vast ocean, and it has many waves, wavelets, tsunamis, small, big, one that lasts a long time, one that just comes up and disappears. If we take each wave or wavelet that comes, appears, disappears, and compare it to Jivatma, which also appears, disappears. A Jiva appears, and if it's a moth, it appears and disappears very quickly. If it's a human being, perhaps it lasts for a longer time. Maybe, may not be. Even human beings have cradle deaths. Or you could be that yoga practitioner recently who got the Padma Bhushan award. They've been living for 125 years. But it comes and it goes. He will also go. And if you think of where these waves came from, what sustained the waves and where do they disappear eventually? They all arose from the ocean. So if you look at Parameshwara as the ocean, all knowledge, all power, from which the entire Jagat arose, was sustained by, and into which it resolved back. Just like every wave, every bubble in the ocean arose from the ocean, was sustained by the ocean, and disappeared into the ocean. Every object in the Jagat, tangible, intangible, small, big, near, far, whatever, arose from that Ishvara, was sustained by Ishvara, disappeared back into Ishvara. There are models for this. So now we know that the wave or the bubble or whatever, tsunami, etc., is non-separate from the ocean. It is the ocean. Every jiva in this Jagat is non-separate from the Ishvara. They don't have an independent existence. There cannot be a wave or a wavelet or a bubble or a tsunami without the ocean. They have no independent existence. Now, if you look at that example a little more deeply, what is the nature of the ocean? What is the tattva of the ocean? It is only water. And every one of these waves, wavelets, etc., are also nothing but water. In the same way, you can look at every jiva and Ishvara. We said there is non-separate. But what is the nature of each of these? What is the satyam? What is the atma of each of these? Nothing but that nirguna Brahman, anantam Brahman, satyam Brahman, jnanam Brahman. There is no real difference between Brahman, which is nirgunam, which is satyam, jnanam, anantam, and Parameshwara. They are the same. Why do we have two different things? Are they two different things? They aren't. That concept has come about because we, the human beings, who have to understand this truth of myself, know that there is a Jagat around us. A lot of non-I objects. I have to give credence to my knowledge of these. I have to understand what the nature of these is before I can understand the nature of I. Because that is all we know. What we read in the Shastra about Parameshwara or about Brahman is also knowledge. But what is the knowledge we know directly? It's about what's in the world. The pain in the world, the suffering in the world, the joy in the world, the objects in the world, the hatred in the world, the love in the world, the war in the world. We know those. How do you account for them? In order to move towards understanding I, we start with this. Every knowledge of I starts with the knowledge of the Jagat. And what is that knowledge that we learn? I know that this Jagat is real. That if I break my bone, I have pain. That if somebody insults me, I have hurt. If somebody praises me, I have joy. All this we know. But Shastra does something. It takes a whole lot of all of this, the physical objects, the intangible objects, the feelings, the emotions, everything, and explains that they have no independent existence. This includes my body, my thought, my feelings, my emotions, my strengths, my weaknesses. None of these have, not one has any independent existence. They depend for their existence on something else. So taking it from there, we see that there is Jagat Karanam Brahman, Ishvara. We are derivatives from there. The body, the mind, the intellect, the thoughts, everything is a derivative from there. Like all the golden ornaments are derivatives of gold. None of the golden ornaments has an independent existence. From any one of these golden ornaments, if I remove the gold, what is left? There is no chain, there is no bangle. So this kind of an example is used to help us understand that all of these, the body, mind, sense, etc., do not have an independent existence. They depend on something else. So we create the idea of all power, all knowledge, Ishvara. And we accept it. To that Ishvara, we pray. We pray for gaining something that we think will give us what we want. We pray for removing something which gives us pain because we don't want pain. And as we begin to understand, we pray to that all-power, almighty, omniscient Ishvara to help me understand the truth of myself. And that truth brings us to a stage where we transcend even Ishvara. Because Ishvara is what we call Saguna Brahman, the same Brahman which is Nirguna, which is infinite, Anantam, to which I, because of my limitations, attribute certain qualities that I can recognize as Ishvara, as something I can approach because it's all power, all knowledge. And with that approach, with that bhakti, with that devotion, with that prayerful attitude, I keep moving up in my prayers to Ishvara. When eventually it becomes clear to me, to any human being, that this qualities that I've imposed on Ishvara and the qualities that I've imposed on myself are all only impositions. They have no existence. So if I can cognitively see there is this Ishvara, which you can think of as Brahman with attributes. What kind of attributes? Sarvajñatvam, Sarvashaktimatvam. And I as the same Brahman with different attributes. Alpatvam, Alpajnanatvam, Alpashaktimatvam. All of these are, like I said, imposed attributes. If I can cognitively separate them, Brahman, Ishvara, I, all become one. Not become one, all, I recognize all as one. But I have to go through this route. I cannot even suddenly tell a person who Shastra will not, in answer to any question in any Upanishad, will not straight away say Tattvamasi. Shastra will not even say you are the same as Ishvara. It will lead us slowly by the hand through a series of prayerful attitudes to that place where we can begin to understand that there is only one indivisible Vastu, Satyam, and that Satyam is I. In this process of learning, we go through a whole lot of correcting our previously entrenched notions. Being what we are, humans endowed with capacity to think capacity to discriminate, capacity to draw inferences. We have stuffed ourselves with a lot of conclusions. All these conclusions have to be examined very, very carefully with the help of the Shastra, with the help of a Guru, and layer by layer, these have to be peeled off. These are the coverings of mistaken notions. Like an onion, you have to peel them off one by one. Simply understand the satyam of I. Even after we have learnt this, I've studied one Upanishad is enough. But even after you have done that, the human mind refuses to give up what it has learned, not just this Janma, but in many, many, many Janmas. It is like somebody who has been living in, let's say, one place for the last 30 years and then moved to a new place. As he returns from work, his mind is on what happened in the office. Without thinking, the fellow goes to the old place. Our mind tends to do that. This is only living in one place for 20 or 30 years. Can you imagine? For millions of janmas, we've been having the same notion. Keep going back to that. So to help us understand this, Shastra says, please listen to this knowledge. Shravanam Kuru. And as you hear, process it, think about it, contemplate upon it. What is this contemplation? I have a whole lot of things in my head already. And here is something new that my Shastra is telling me. Because I have Shraddha in the Shastra, what the Shastra tells, I do not reject because it opposes what I think I know. Otherwise, what happens when you have a drawing room discussion? And I'm convinced that Putin is right in invading Ukraine. Another fellow comes with another argument. Whatever a logic, invading another sovereign nation is a no-no. Our mind does not even listen to what he's saying. We've already formulated arguments. America did this. That time you didn't condemn. They invaded Iraq on false pretenses. And then simply said, oh, I'm sorry, we had wrong information. We didn't condemn that. So we're already arguing. In such a simple thing like this, there are multiple ways of looking at it. What happens in knowledge like this about oneself? Mind becomes sometimes very rigid. It does not allow this knowledge to sink in because my previously held notions are so strong. Sometimes it allows it because I have Shraddha, but creates confusion. How can this also be right and this also be right? How can I be a limited person at the same time I'm Ishvara? How can both be true together? So one has to do mananam, examination of each idea that is there in my head. Check with what Upanishad tells us. And find out where it doesn't match. And try and analyze why it doesn't match. Is there an assumption, mistake I'm making somewhere? Is there something I am taking for granted without analyzing the basis? Is there a problem with how I have defined I? Could there be a problem there? Could there be a problem in my assuming that when the body is in pain, I am in pain? Could there be a problem when my mind is disturbed? I feel I am disturbed. Knowing very well that I'm saying my mind, my mind cannot be I. Anything mine cannot be I. I know that. And yet we make these very common mistakes. Before Shastra itself recognizes this, Shastra knows that we will all go through this process of debate within our own minds, debate with others who are learning the same thing. Shastra clearly tells us, do Shravanam and do Mananam. Examine each of these statements that you hear the Guru explaining from the Upanishad. Examine against what you think you already know. Find out where the discrepancy is. And where it's not clear, ask somebody who knows. Remove all the discrepancies, therefore all the doubts. Then that knowledge becomes clear. Like I said, that by itself is not the end of the story. I still have a problem. Even after I have done so much Shravanam and so much Mananam, analysis of what I think I know against what I have learned from the Upanishad, I still go back and the same problem outside. It all looks very clear as long as I'm in the class. I go back to deal with the Jagat, to transact with the Jagat. All that I thought I understood gets pushed to the background. It takes a finite amount of time to examine why that happens. Like the fellow who went to his old house. Why does that happen? Therefore, a continuous process of Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasana. The more I contemplate upon the words of the Shastra as unfolded by the Guru, even after the class is over, after my Shravanam is over, I contemplate upon those words. Try and understand what they say. Doubts will come, questions will come. Allow them to come. Try to address them. Ask questions. Shastra encourages us to do that. You've seen in the Bhagavad Gita also, pariprashnena sevaya. Gain this knowledge by asking appropriate questions, both of yourself and of somebody who knows. Tad viddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. With the right attitude, with the right type of questioning, not to pick a hole in what Shastra says, but to truly understand what it says, is the very nature of the Upanishad. This Upanishad we are now been looking at, called Ganapathi Atharvashirshopanishad, also is one of the many Upanishads. We will look at the nature of this Upanishad and the details of what it actually says in the classes further. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.